organizer with Tenants Neighbors, and I'm so happy to be here with all of you up here talking about this really important issue for tenants in New York City. So let's find out first who's here. Who here is a rent control tenant? Wow. Part of the work that we've been working on is to try to pass a very, very important bill through the state legislature. And so this bill is sponsored by Assembly Member Linda Rosenthal and State Senator Adriano Espaillat. And this bill, A 1892 S5699, would abolish the MBR system. The maximum base rent system is the system that gives the rent control tenants rate increases up to 7.5% a year. Rent control tenants also receive a fuel pass-along, which is too high for a lot of rent control tenants. And so this bill would get rid of this system of rent calculations and put rents for rent control tenants under the Rent Guidelines Board. So rent control tenants want to keep their protections as rent control tenants, but want their rents to be calculated under the Rent Guidelines Board.
In 1961, there were 1.8 million of us, and now there are only 38,000. There have been no new rent-controlled apartments since 1971. We are committed to our neighbors. We supported our communities. We helped our communities flourish and grow. We sent our kids to the local schools. We shopped at our neighborhood stores and contributed to making our neighborhoods a terrific place as they are today. Since 1971, our rents have increased by over 580% through a complicated mathematical formula which guarantees that our landlords earn a return on their investment.
We are thrilled that this week the Assembly Housing Committee passed our legislation, A 1892A, which is co-sponsored by another great ally in this fight, State Senator Adriano Espaillat. This bill will finally restore fairness for the thousands upon thousands of rent-controlled tenants who are not treated fairly by the existing MBR system. Linda has fought for years to get rid of the MBR system, which has led to rent-controlled tenants, as you know, having automatic 7.5% increases every year. To add insult to injury, the system forces rent-controlled tenants, many of whom live on fixed incomes, to pay fuel pass-alongs, which only compounds the problem. There is absolutely no reason, ladies and gentlemen, that just because one happens to live in a rent-controlled apartment, or just because you happen to be one of the millions of New Yorkers that live on fixed incomes, that the MBR system can continue to take advantage of you and require you to pay higher than rent-stabilized tenants. The MBR formula does not take into account the real-world financial pressures of tenants. This is appalling, and it must end.
So I was chair of the community board in 2007, and one of the first things I did was ask for help in doing an analysis of how many rent-controlled, rent-stabilized apartments there were in Community Board 7. We did that analysis, and what's disturbing is that we did it again this year, and the numbers have gone down a ridiculous amount. We need to turn around this trend, and we need to have more affordable apartments in our city, not fewer.
So you know the MBR system has to be pretty bad if Tenants and Neighbors and the Real Rent Reform Campaign is saying that the Rent Guidelines Board is a better system. Right? We all know that's not perfect, but with over 500% increases under the MBR system, we know it's time for that to go. So we're here as the Real Rent Reform Campaign, a coalition of over 70 pro-tenant organizations, to say now's the time to end the MBR system and have fair rent increases for rent-controlled and rent-stabilized tenants in New York and the suburban counties.
I figured it out. I figured it out.
She figured it out.
With the PCN you had, I figured it out.
She figured it out.
7.5% never meant a hell of a lot. 7.5% didn't seem so rough. But give it to them every time, every year for 40 years. That's enough for them to be living like a king. I figured it out.
She figured it out.
I figured it out.
I figured it out.
With the PCN you had, I figured it out.
She figured it out.
In 5 years from today, in 5 years from today, I can see it all before me in 5 years from today. 5 years, let's see, that's 7.5% plus the fuel pass along, plus the major capital improvements comes almost to double my rent. That's too much for me to pay my rent, get my food, get my medicine, pay for emergencies, because the rent is just damn high. So, although 7.5% really is a hell of a lot, 7.5% really takes our dough. Our rent's soaring every year, they kick us out without a tear, so the MBR system really has to go.
I figured it out! She figured it out! I figured it out!
She figured it out.
With the PC and keypad, I figured it out!
She figured it out.
In 10 years from today, only 10 years from today, I can see it clear as daylight. Only 10 years from today. Now again, let's see, 10 years, that's the MBR increases at 7.5% yearly, the fuel pass along, and the major capital improvement increases all at once. That's too much for me to live in New York City for the rest of my years. Maybe take up a new career, maybe even have to move the neighborhood I helped improve. The MBR system has to be removed. So, although 7.5% really is a hell of a lot, 7.5% really takes our dough. Our rents keep soaring every year, they kick us out without a tear, and so the MBR system really has to go. They figured it out! Figured it out!
They figured it out. So, although 7.5% really is a hell of a lot, 7.5% really takes our dough. Our rents keep soaring every year, they kick us out without a tear, and so the MBR system finally